Hello, this is EJK. This game is going to be a TVT between Maru and TY on King Sejong Station, played in Pro League earlier this week. Very cool TVT in my opinion. Not even before you even watch the game, you know it's going to be a hyped up TVT because both players have very contrasting play styles, and I think that's just a testament to how you can get to the top of the game by doing your own thing. TY is going for a wall off to wall off against Reaper. I'm not really sure why he does that. I don't have as much experience in this matchup as these players, nor as much practice. Maru, on the other hand, deciding not to, but both players going for a gas and then a Rax build. I find that the gas and then Rax in Reaper Expand is a lot better because you get not only your Reaper out faster, but you get the first Hellion and the first Cyclone out faster as well, and your tech is just accelerated slightly more so that it's easier to defend against more aggressive builds. Oh, okay, so Maru is walling off with those two depots. So both players already making preparations to wall off, but Maru is going for a slightly different opener than TY by making that Marine, whereas TY ends up going for a reactor on the barracks after the first Reaper. But both of their command centers come down at roughly the same time. The only difference is that since Maru didn't go for a Reaper, he has a lot more gas and he was able to start his factory slightly before his command center. So cool build by Maru. Cool build by TY. This is the new age, or the newest renditions of different build orders that are good in TVT, I would say. Both build orders I don't really see a problem with. They're both very solid. Now TY is going for Reactor Hellions, and I think this is a result of him seeing the Marine, and he knows that there's going to be a fast medevac drop on the way. If there's no Reaper, you know that it's going to be no one does a gasless expand, so the only other option is a faster factory. And to be able to defend against that, especially on a big map such as King Sejong Station, I don't mind the idea of making Hellions early on for defense, which we see in a little bit. I think works out very well for TY. So both players are powering up now. Their command centers are done. There isn't really a lead for either player, and now Maru is starting off the aggression with his medevac drop. TY's Viking is almost complete. Not quite, though. It's interesting to see Maru make the add-ons on his racks and his factory. Oh, okay, so the reason why people wall off there isn't to keep Reapers out, but it's to prevent Reapers from leaving. So you can essentially chase down a Reaper because the Reaper has to come back the way it came from to get it out. Okay, that makes more sense. We learn things every day, people. So Widow Mine Drop didn't really do much. It's nice that he was able to get one SCV and some lost mining time, mess up the mules. Good usage of not having to use a scan and instead using the supply depot to pick off the Widow Mine. I'm definitely going to have to remember that in my TVTs. But now both players are kind of stabilizing. Cloak is very popular on maps such as King Sejong Station, where there is a lot of airspace where the standard 3-turret defense will not cover all of the areas, and neither will making a Raven, Cyclone, and Vikings either. So although it might cover the defense initially, if you save up Banshees, then the Raven can't be in 2 spots at once. The Cyclone can't be at 2 spots at once either. So you're almost guaranteed to do damage no matter how you play out the game by going for Banshees on certain maps. On maps such as Runes of Endion and Frost, I would say Banshees aren't that great. They are more easily pinned. Now this fight looks a little bit deceiving to see who's going to win. Now, I like the idea behind it because Maru essentially, he was going into the fight without an advantage. He was going with it with an unadvantage or disadvantage, I mean. um, but what's on the way is his Banshee. So this attack essentially forces Tai to start engaging at a favorable moment, and then the tide swings as soon as the Banshee times into the battle, which is a very, very, very solid timing by Maru, I must say. To time this fight out. Like, he could have waited for the Banshee to come, mind you. He could have waited a couple seconds, it would have made it have difference. But Maru wanted to start to force the engagement and then have the Banshee come on towards the end as he was losing to help reinforce the fight. Getting a couple kills off with the Banshee is good. The key thing is to keep the Banshee alive. You need to keep the Banshees alive. They're too expensive to replace continuously. So just keeping them alive and keeping a threat of Banshees essentially forces your opponent to have a lot of Banshee defense at all times. Maru is taking his third base on location. I think it's a safe thing to do because the only really big threats to a fast third are fast stim builds. But if you go for a fast stim build, you're not going to have the necessary defense, in my opinion, to defend against Banshee harass on this map. Your factory is going to be delayed. It's going to be used for a reactor for your medevacs, and even if you don't make medevacs, you make 2 Vikings, then all of a sudden your medevac stim timing is all messed up. And it's just your build is messed up a lot. TY on the other hand is going for a slightly faster upgrade. I don't really like that as much because he's going for +1 attack before he goes for stim even, and an argument can be made that stim pack or getting other important components of your build, such as a faster command center, slightly faster tech, is a lot more important than getting +1 attack early on in this game. It doesn't create an upgrade advantage by any means, and it's not used as a timing defensively or offensively either. Maru does a good job of cleaning this push up. Landing the Vikings is a very intelligent decision. It gives him the necessary firepower to push TY's army back. But TY's Banshees are able to do a lot of counterattacking, and as we see here, even though Maru has well-placed turrets, there are always blind spots where the turrets do not cover that the Banshees can camp over and essentially force a lot of lost mining time. So in a way, although the Banshees haven't done too many SCV kills, 5 is still a respectable number. Maru loses a lot of mining time on top of that. As this game progresses on, Maru has opted for a mid-game of a more massive amount of Vikings than TY. TY is trying to power up a lot more. The +1 attack not really doing anything for him now, except I suppose keeping the upgrade lead fairly even, or at least so that he doesn't fall too far behind. And this is the part where TVT starts to stabilize and neither player can essentially kill each other very fast. Now, what you can expect is trying to do small amounts of damage. Oh, that micro from TY. There's 2 SCVs that are 1 hit away, and he doesn't target them down, and he misses out on a couple of SCV kills. Going from, say, 4 SCVs on that 1 Banshee to, say, 6 or 7, you almost double your SCV kills. Yeah, increase it by up to like 50% if you can target fire and micro properly. Banshees are being driven away slowly, but they have paid for themselves. They have netted themselves a lot of kills over the course of their lifespan. And the key is really to just keep them alive and keep them poking in here and there and not letting them die, which is what really allows them to become effective. Now Maru's stim pack is already done, and his combat shields is already done as well. And TY's stim is only halfway done. His combat shields is starting, so he doesn't fall too far behind. Their combat shields should finish around the same time. But essentially this means that TY has to be playing very defensively, whereas Maru has the opportunity to move out first. And we see that reflected in how comfortable both players feel about being out on the map. TY, he's spreading out units right now, but he's not moving his main army out. Maru's going to be the first person to move his main army out, and TY also is the first player to build a sensor tower, whereas I believe Maru does not build a sensor tower a single sensor tower this entire game. And it's not because he has map hacks, it's because one, sensor towers aren't very effective on this map. They don't cover the entire area. We see TY's sensor tower covers a good portion, but then he needs a supply depot to cover the blind spot that medevacs can fly over. And the sensor towers also, they're pretty expensive, and Maru knows that he has the army lead, or he can be the aggressor, I should say, so TY is going to be on the defensive with his siege tanks, whereas Maru is going to be on the offensive, and there's really nothing either player can do about it. Being able to get the command center cancel is nice. TY was playing very conservatively, trying to pick off buildings where the Reaper wall was built earlier on. So this battle is very important because both players start the battle with 6 siege tanks. And when you start with this many siege tanks, you immediately want to place them as close as possible outside the range of other siege tanks. So they're like the siege tank radius is like right around here, so they're like barely hitting each other. And you want to immediately target fire the tanks down, because if you can somehow get an extra volley of like 5 tank shots versus say 1 or 2, tank shots do a lot more damage than marine shots. So although right now this isn't a good time for Maru to attack, he doesn't have a upgrade advantage, he doesn't have an army advantage, he doesn't have any timing advantage whatsoever, except the fact that he just wants to attack at this point. And so although it's not the most favorable time for Maru to engage, the fact that he is able to pick off all of TY's siege tanks and essentially reset the siege tank count, and although it looks like he does lose this engagement, that's not the case, because we see now TY is reset to essentially 0 siege tanks against 2. But more importantly, TY only has 1 factory at this point. I had to double check in the VOD because this observer really likes to use the units tab when action is going on. But we see on the production tab, TY is only making 1 tank at a time, whereas Maru is making 2. And with the tank count being reset to essentially 0-0, but Maru having a 2 tank count lead, that essentially snowballs into a very big advantage for Maru. Not immediately target firing that tank down. Bit of miscontrol by TY. You always want to target the tanks down. That's what Maru does in all of his engagements. He always focuses priority on keeping the siege tank count either low or even, or finding ways to create advantages with siege tanks so they can move around with his army. So like what we see right now, he immediately target fires on that 1 siege tank and picks it off, knows that 4 shots kill a siege tank, and both players have 0-0 upgrades on their siege tanks right now. So now it's 6 tanks to 1 when it should have been 6 to 2, but still this is a very big deficit for TY. And I think the only 2 logical reasons that TY doesn't have a second factory right now is because A, he wasn't planning on building it until later, or B, he forgot it. But if B, he forgot it, he would have noticed it sooner and added it on. But he's still adding it on fairly late right now. So I think his overall game plan was to be very active on the map with these marine drops and do marine counterattacks and rely on a heavier marine count to kind of keep Maru on the defensive, so that these kinds of pushes with the siege tanks wouldn't be nearly as effective and TY would be able to punish Maru. That counter medevac attack is kind of out of position, not as effective as he would like it to be. But at this point in the game, I also want to point out that this supply wall is very, very smart on Maru's part. It forces TY to go in this direction rather than straight to the SCVs and delay mining time because of the depots, and it just creates a lot of natural choke areas so that the tank can get a lot of shots off. So great defense, defending 4 medevacs worth of marines with a single tank for a long time, and buying enough time for enough marines to get into the fight to push away that force by TY. Maru's also secured his 4th base. Oops. Maru has his 4th base secured, and he's also had that double tank production going for a long time, so he's about twice as many tanks as TY right now. And almost getting caught in a bad spot there, but immediately backing up and then placing his tanks down. His opponent can't really chase into that without siege tank coverage of his own. We see Maru slightly fighting there for a second without any coverage of his own siege tanks, and he loses slightly more Marines than he'd like to. TY is going for this big Doom drop right now at the natural, and although Maru doesn't have a sensor tower, he literally just doesn't have a sensor tower, and he doesn't care that this is happening. Oh, he's trying to, okay, he gets the engineering bay, but 3-3 is already done for Maru, and although that Doom drop seemed like it was going to do a lot of damage, the fact that it's 8 siege tanks to 3, and Maru had essentially doubled the amount of siege tanks at least to cover the defense there in tank evacs, so TY wasn't able to do a lot of damage and get into a good position. Well, even if he was actually able to get into a good position, he wouldn't be able to capitalize it because he'd be forced to back off due to the fact that Maru has a much higher tank count than TY. And this game really is being decided by the tank count. TY is struggling to take a 4th base. He's struggling to do any damage at all, actually, because Maru has a lot rock solid defense essentially, and siege tanks do allow a greater defensive advantage than just Marines. And now TY is kind of trying to go for a base trade, but there's no way that he's going to break it. 3 tanks there. If there weren't 3 tanks, then it might have gone a bit better, but just having all those tanks there, and Maru immediately stimming up and killing those 2 tanks, like his priority when he sees a tank is to kill it. I just want to point out the way that he micros his Marines. I thought this was pretty cool. So the siege tanks are sieged up, and Maru knows the rhythm of the siege tanks. So rather than trying to like start stutter stepping his Marines, he essentially tanks 1 tank shot, and then right before this second tank shot, he targets down all the tanks. So he takes a tank shot, and then he just kind of targets them down. So good play by him. Nice little micro tricks to pick up. And TY is essentially left for dead at this point. And good game. Maru now has a sensor tower up as natural, but that was only because he wasn't aware that TY only had 1 factory for a long time. As far as he was concerned, TY was pulling up siege tanks at home or putting them into a different position. So he did have a tank advantage at some point, and then he started to readjust his map presence by adding a sensor tower so that he can be in the proper position with his tank evacs versus TY's tank evacs if they were to grow. Good game, though nonetheless.